I want to welcome you all to Pack Your Veggie Haul using your farmers market finds or CSA share with Kate Munning. Tonight, you're going to get tips and tricks and recipes to help you make the most of your farmers market finds or CSA share. You'll learn how to love the challenging and unfamiliar produce and get insight on prep and storage and make meals that your family will enjoy. Impress your friends, eliminate waste, and get the most bang for your buck. And all of your questions will be answered. Our guest tonight is Kate Munning. She's a curious cook, a gardener, a lifelong learner, and she tends a small but mighty food forest on Schooley's Mountain and orchestrates farm dinners at Genesis Farm, the community-supported garden at Genesis Farm. From shiso to pawpaws, she fears no fruit or vegetable, relishing the challenge of preserving 100 pounds of peppers or coaxing children into loving Brussels sprouts. And with that, I'd like to welcome Kate Munning.
I'm a vegetable evangelist. I love veggies. I was a vegetarian for 8 years, but I am unfortunately reformed now. And I just love flavors. I love seeking flavors. I reject this idea that vegetables are we only eat them because they're healthy. I think vegetables are delicious. I love cooking foods from all different cultures, and I'm always seeking out new flavors. So I have some veggies here. These are all from the community supported garden at Genesis Farm. They are gorgeous. I'm not sure if you can see them up close and personal, but they're just beautiful. I have been a member at Genesis Farm since I was a child. So I grew up lucky enough to eat these really terrific vegetables. And when I moved back to the area, I rediscovered the farm, and now I'm deeply involved in a number of ways, including cooking farm dinners. In fact, there's a farm dinner coming up on October 7th. If you're interested in attending, just shoot me an email or throw it in the chat, and I'd be happy to get in touch with you and figure out how to make that happen. But when you have veggies that are this gorgeous, this fresh, grown regeneratively, like so local, this does not come from a warehouse, this is not sprayed with pesticides, this is the best stuff you can get. And often you're going to pay a premium for that. So I feel very strongly, I mean, I would anyway, but especially with vegetables this beautiful, I don't want any of it to go to waste. And sometimes when you sign up for a CSA, you don't always know what you're going to get. And that can be a little bit intimidating. It was intimidating for me. I'd be lying if I said I'm never intimidated, but I've gotten pretty comfortable, and I have a serious repertoire of recipes and books and websites and friends who teach me recipes from other cultures, and just a lot of experience under my belt making good food out of these gorgeous, gorgeous veggies. So there are a couple of basic foundational tenets that I use to make sure that I'm using the vegetables that I get from the farmer's market, or really for me, it's from my CSA, which I belong to year round. So this is, for me, this is something that I do all the time. And it does take a while to get comfortable with it, right? It's not something that as Americans, we don't really eat this way. We kind of go to the grocery store and we see what we feel like, or we're on a diet and this is the list of foods that are the best foods for us to eat, or something like that. And that's not really how I cook. I want to cook with what's in season. I know that the vegetables that have just come out of the ground have the most nutrients. They taste the best. And that's what I want to use. And I've gotten used to that, and I'm lucky. That's a privilege. But I don't think it's as unattainable, and it's not as intimidating as some people might think. So one of the things that I do is I plan my meals. I do plan my meals every week, which may or may not work for you, but you could at least plan a couple days in advance. And I use what's in my fridge. And I don't, what a lot of us do as Americans is we'll have a protein at the center of the plate, and we'll plan some little side things around it. And that's not how I operate. I look at what's in my fridge. I see what kinds of beautiful, beautiful veggies I've gotten from the farm that week. And I use that as the foundation. And then I see what kinds of proteins, starches, other delicious things will round out my meal. I like putting vegetables at the center of the plate. And in fact, that's the title of one of my books that it's in the other room. One of the books that I have on a research sheet that I will give you at the end of this. It's called Vegetables at the Center of the Plate. I love this approach, and it served me well. It served me well. It has expanded my palate. It has made our dinners more interesting. It has gotten my kids to eat all sorts of weird and wacky vegetables that we don't usually see every day on American plates. And yeah, it served me well. So as we're moving into fall, we're thinking about, what do we have? We're seeing the last of the corn and the tomatoes. We're seeing the peppers. Those are going to be falling off soon. We're seeing the early squashes, like this delicata here. This is like a kind of like a between season squash, like between summer and fall, shoulder season as they call it. And this is going to be kind of like a cross between a zucchini and a butternut. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're going to start seeing fall greens, the brassicas, the things in like the broccoli and the kale family, kale, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. Those are things that I actually get very excited about. I didn't always love those vegetables, but I love them. I certainly love them now. And then after that, we're going to get root vegetables, and which are super nutrient dense, so healthy for us, but can be a little intimidating. But we'll talk about that too. So some of the ways that I organize my meals are not by using specific recipes. It's really easy to get hung up on, you find a recipe, you're like, oh my gosh, this looks really good, or somebody recommended this to me. And don't get me wrong, recipes are great. And it's very important to find trusted recipe sources. I've got my stack right here. But it's more important to find things that, again, suit what you already have. Instead of finding a recipe in a magazine or seeing something on Instagram and saying, oh, I want to make that and I have to make it exactly as written. You can think about how it can be adapted to what you happen to have in the fridge that day. Or you can think, oh, maybe I can just like file this away and make it when these vegetables are in season. But usually something can be adapted. Usually it can be. And so at my house, we have some categories of things. We have soups for every season. We have salads for every season. You can grill a pile of vegetables in any season. And my secret weapon, that is one of my favorite things to make, is a frittata, okay? Because that is something you can make at any time of the year. Now, if you eat eggs, of course, you can make it at any time of the year, and you can use whatever you have in your fridge. In fact, we often call it, at my house, we call it fridge clean out, okay? And you can use vegetables, you can use whatever kind of onion, garlic, leek, scallion you have. You can use whatever, pepper, zucchini, butternut, mushrooms, broccoli, whatever you want. You can use whatever you want and you can throw it in there. And it's not about a specific recipe. It's about a formula, and which I will share with you. So it's really about ratios of ingredients that will give you a nice finished product. It won't be too soupy. It won't be too dry. It gives you a nice, round, complete meal, which is also easy, which is nice. So what else do also the bowl. I love the grain bowl or the rice bowl, also terrific, because what you do is you take your favorite grain. For us, it's often brown rice, and you can just assemble what you like. In fact, if you have kids that are picky, you could actually have like almost like a little buffet station, and people can put what they like in the bowl. Often I will have a few seasonal veggies prepped prepped in whatever way is appropriate for that season. And you have your grains, you have a few veggies, you have some kind of protein, whether it's beans or tofu or chicken or pork or bacon, and then often make some kind of tasty sauce. And the tasty sauce, like, then it's a whole meal. That's it. You're done. So really, yeah, if you can find some trusted sources and you can find some, those trusted sources will give you things that you can make in any season. So like this, when I was vegetarian, this book, Vegetarian Cooking for Everyone, and also this book, How to Cook Everything Vegetarian by Mark Bittman, these were like my Bibles. And you know what's funny though? I actually don't consult these that much anymore. However, that's because I probably have a half a dozen recipes from each of these books that have just become like just part of my repertoire. So, that soup, oh yeah, that's the soup that I make every September when the squash starts coming in. That's the soup that I always make. It's the soup my whole family likes. It's the soup that I know that I'm gonna have those veggies on hand in September, or for example, Like here they have in this book there's a vegetarian tortilla soup, dynamite, wonderful, that you use peppers and onions and you can obviously add other things to it, but you know, you can use whatever vegetables happen to be on hand. It's really great for like this time of year. And another thing that we make from here is potatoes and quinoa that are roasted in the oven with peppers and scallions and some cheese sprinkled on top. That's like, again, like one of our classic dinners at our house. I don't even use the recipe anymore because it's just become part of our repertoire. And you can have that confidence too once you start to be like, hey, I thought I hated kohlrabi, but then I made this slaw that was actually really good. And so I'm just going to like note that, and I'm going to make sure that I make that every time I get a kohlrabi. And it's similar for this book, this vegetarian cooking for everyone. One of my favorite things from this book is a chowder, which actually, now that I realize, it also has potatoes and quinoa in it, but it's a very different format. And it is just potatoes, quinoa, jalapenos, garlic, and then you pour a ton of spinach in and some scallions, and then you sprinkle some feta on top if you cheese. It's so good. And honestly, it's really nice. It could be a one-pot meal if you were doing a super light dinner, or you could add something onto it, some bread, a salad, something else if you wanted to round it out. So the sources for me are critical, because I don't know about you, but I go online lately and I try to search for recipes, and wow, it's the results that come up are not, they're not sources that I feel really confident about. They tend to be just kind of like random boosted blogs that are, you know, like, I don't know if you are familiar with like the stereotype where there's like a 2,000 word article before you finally get to the recipe at the bottom. We don't need that. Find some trusted sources, which again, I've made a list for you of my favorites. And again, also happy to answer questions about your specific dietary needs or the kind of just the kind of way that you like to cook. Happy to answer questions, because I have 2 full bookcases full of cookbooks, and I'm sure you can get most of them from your local library. You can get them online somewhere. So there are a lot of high quality sources out there, but you're not always going to find them with like a quick Google search. And hopefully you already have some of your own places that you like to find recipes, but if not, I can help. Another thing that I really enjoy is looking to other cultures, because America, the US doesn't really, we kind of lack our own food ways, like in a cohesive way. If you look to other cultures, they often have a deeply rooted tradition of using what they have. And if you think about, even if you think about Italian food, Italian peasant food is based on making the most of what you have. It's based, a lot of it has very little meat, like peasant food. Italian peasant food often has very little meat in it. It uses what is available. If you think about a minestrone soup, that's like, we have an idea of what minestrone is like as Americans, but a minestra is really just using whatever you happen to have that's coming out of the garden at a specific moment. And again, about boosting those flavors with like garlic and herbs and cheese and, you know, a strategic use of breadcrumbs and things like that. And you can say the same about Latin American food. You can say the same thing about Indian food. You can say the same thing about about Middle Eastern food. They have these just wonderful flavors that, again, can be intimidating to American palates, but they don't have to be. Not everything is going to be chili spicy. Not everything has to be use complicated ingredients. A lot of these things are super basic. Like in our house, my kids get excited when we make dal for dinner, and that's because we have just this dynamite recipe that's like our family dal recipe that, of course, I started out sourcing from an Instagram user who is Indian, and I make that recipe and I customize it to use whatever I happen to have on hand in my fridge, in my fruit basket, whatever. So I love looking to other cultures. And also, if that's something you're interested in, I haven't really included, well, Jerusalem is, Ottolenghi is he's Mediterranean, but all of these other ones are very, very Western centric. These cookbooks I have here. If you are interested in cooking from other cultures, I would love to give you some recommendations because I get really excited about that and I would love to share. So just email me. So what are some of the other books that I have here? So we have Mark Bittman. He's terrific. I don't know if you've heard of him. He has a lot of books, and he wrote for the New York Times for a long time. And I don't know if it has a name, but for a while he was doing this vegan before 6 diet, right? Just for himself. But of course he wrote about it in highly acclaimed publications. And so he has a lot of vegetarian recipes, and he's an interesting guy too. And he's very creative. And he also relies on these premises I'm talking about, where a lot of these recipes in this book specifically are formulas. And so he'll have a recipe for a soup, and he'll say, then the recipe will be followed by like 4 different varieties, for 4 different variations on the recipe. Like, if you have butternut, do this. If you have spaghetti squash, do this. If you have mushrooms, do this. And I love that because once you realize that you can use different ingredients in a recipe and you're not locked into a very specific list of ingredients, I've found for me, and I think it can for you, it gives you confidence. It's like, oh, I do know what I'm talking about. I do know what tastes good. I know what my family likes. I'm just going to make this substitution. I'm going to make it this way instead. And that's one of the things I really love about this book. I've had this book for like 20 years now. And back when I was a younger cook, it gave me a lot of confidence. Like this one, polenta pizza. And then, so this is the standard recipe. And then he has Mexican style, right? And then this is, if you have blue cornmeal, you do make it this way. If you want to make it for breakfast, you make it this way. I love that. And then this is like 10 garnishes for pozole. And so the fact that there are so many options make it so that, like, chances are one of those will either interest you or include things that you already have on hand. So, all right. Are there any questions so far?
Nothing's come through in the chat. If anybody has any questions, or you could try raising your hand and I can allow you to talk through this app. My first time I'm ever doing this. Okay, Mary Beth, I see that you, all right, you should be able to talk to us, Mary Beth. You have to unmute yourself though.
Okay, I think I just unmuted.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're good.
We hear you.
Okay, all right. So basically, I lost everything you said because my computer just kind of went out.
Oh no.
I noticed you were recording this. Is there any way I can get a recording? Because I write for Ridgeview Echo and I'm supposed to write a story about you.
Yes, everyone is going to get the recording after we're done.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
So then I can listen to what I miss. All right, sorry. That's all.
No
Glad
problem.
you mentioned it.
All right, so how do I mute this? Oh, wait, I think I know.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
No.
All right, just raise your hand and I'll see. Oh wait, I see another raised hand here. Okay, this is for Harry. Harry, unmute yourself and you should be able to talk.
Okay, I'm trying to do it.
You're good. We hear you. Oh, no, you're muted again. Now you're good.
Okay. Can you folks hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
now we can.
Okay, well, I'm sorry my video is not coming across, but thank you for being here for this webinar. I have a few questions for you. We've been members of the garden for a long, long time. And so things I come up with when I pick up our share.
Mhm.
There are sometimes veggies that when we pick them up, they've been washed or rinsed. And there's a lot of water sometimes in lettuces or sometimes in some other produce. So when storing these vegetables at home, do we need to let some of that water out first? When
Yeah,
is water the enemy?
I would try to dry them out a little bit. As you've said, with greens, it's a balance, right? You want them to be moist enough so that they're not going to wilt, but you don't want them so wet that the water is going to make them rot prematurely. So if you can lay them on a towel. That you can do what I do sometimes. You might want to do outside. If you don't have a salad spinner, if you don't want to cut it up just yet, Honestly, you can wrap it in a dish towel and kind of like swing it around a few times and the water will come out. So if you do it in your kitchen, be prepared. But it actually, I know it's very DIY, but I actually find it to be a nice way to get some of the water out, but without drying out the whole thing. But you could also just pat it dry, or you can just lay it on the counter with on an absorbent dish towel for, you know, an hour or so, and just kind of try to get some of that water off. But you're right, you do want to get some of it off before you put it in a plastic bag and put it in the refrigerator.
And then, Kate, we get things like root vegetables, beets, carrots, sometimes others. And
Yep.
normally when we pick them up, there's still a fair amount of soil clinging to each one, potatoes too. Is it best to rinse that soil off before we try to store them?
Now, you know, there are pluses and minuses to each. So that decision is made very intentionally. If you talk to Smadar or any of the farmers, they'll tell you our vegetables are dirty for a reason. And you know, it's unfamiliar to us. I mean, it was unfamiliar to me. I know that Smadar said when I rejoined the farm after I lived elsewhere for a while, she says, you know, vegetables are going to be dirty. Are you okay with that? And I was like, yeah, I can handle that. But it is a little bit off-putting, and the reason for that is that that is partly the secret to their success. For the reason that's the reason that they can do a year-round CSA, because when they harvest that carrot in October, it's still going to taste good in April. It sounds astonishing, but it's because of the way that they root cellar everything, and part of that is keeping the vegetables dirty. Now, with that said, once you bring that home, you don't necessarily want to have that dirt all over your kitchen. But I have to say, I do leave my anything I'm going to put in the fridge, I leave dirty. And I just put it in a plastic bag that tends to be dedicated to dirty vegetables. It's like the one dirty vegetable bag. And I put it in my vegetable crisper, and I don't wash the vegetables until I'm going to use them. You know, when it comes to things like potatoes, you know, and sweet potatoes, that means, you know, things I'm going to keep in, you know, like a hanging basket, you know, yeah, they're going to be dirty, and sometimes there's a little dusting of dirt on my counter, and I got to wipe it off every day. It's really up to you. I like to have a clean kitchen, but I also want my vegetables to stay fresh for a long time. So they will stay fresh longer. Like potatoes, they'll take longer to get green if they have that dirt on them and they are exposed to less light. And as you mentioned, if you know, things like beets and carrots, if you leave them dirty, if you wash them and then put them in the fridge, they're gonna be a little less fresh after a couple of weeks than if you leave them dirty. So, you know, you just kind of have to find your own way with that.
And one last question. The garden has wonderful garlic, and we often receive more of it than we can eat or share with our friends, and we want to store it. And you know, we've gotten these little mesh bags to put it in and hang it in the dark cabinet, and it doesn't seem to do well.
Yeah, I've had that happen too. There are a couple things that you can do. The most basic thing is you can do what you might find at the grocery store, or at the Asian grocery, is you can separate them, peel them, and put them in the fridge. So then you just have like a little jar of peeled garlic. Or if that doesn't seem quite your speed, you can do something to preserve it. You can use some kind of preservation method, like making a garlic confit or a roasted garlic, and that's going to last a lot longer because you've processed that and you've cooked it and you've given it a longer shelf life.
Great, thank you.
So, Kate, we have a couple of messages in the chat. Someone says they'd love to hear more about tasty sauces for your veggie bowls. And also somebody wants to know if you will share your Indian dal recipe.
Oh, absolutely. I would be delighted to. I don't know if you want me to say it, or I'd be happy to send it to people.
We will send out tomorrow. We'll send out an email along with the link to the recording.
I think it's the 7th. Okay.
And
yeah, that's a good idea.
Harry, I'm going to mute you, Harry. And we'll send out all the links if you have stuff you want to send out, attachments and all. Mary Beth, I'm going to unmute you because let's see. Mary Beth, did you have another question? Okay. Well, if you do, ask to speak again. So go ahead, Kate. I'm sorry.
So in terms of sauces, man, they really run the gamut, and it really depends on what flavors you like. For me, I tend to love things that are salty and tangy and herby. So I like garlic and citrus and basil and rosemary, and so for something like a rice bowl, it might be usually there's garlic involved, if I'm being, honestly, because I love garlic. But if you don't love garlic, then you just choose something else. And there's so much out there. I'm trying, okay, you know what? I don't have this book, but it's because I rely on this website so much, and it is on my resource sheet. One of my favorite bowls that I'm forgetting the sauce right now, but I know that I love it. I don't know if you folks know, Smitten Kitchen is a really terrific source for, I feel like those recipes are like a sweet spot. She has so much. She also has a couple of books. Like I said, you'll see this on the resource sheet. So you don't have to write it down or anything, but they are fresh, but they are also very like mainstream and accessible. And her rice bowl is like my favorite rice bowl. And I want to say it's kind of like a vaguely Asian fusion-y kind of dressing. So you have like soy sauce, and you have, I think, some citrus and garlic, something tangy. There's probably she doesn't really like too much spice. So I'm trying to remember what the other components are, but it's just kind of like it's made of things that most people have. Oh, is this it? Is that it? Oh my gosh, look at you. Thank you. My trusty assistant here has given me looked up the recipe and gave it to me. Okay, so what does it have? So it has whatever oil of your choice, sherry or rice wine vinegar. So she's already doing what I said. It's kind of a formula where you really use what you like and what you have on hand. It doesn't have to be these specific ingredients. So some kind of oil, sherry or rice wine vinegar, salt, soy sauce or tamari, sesame oil, sriracha or gochujang. So yeah, I had it pretty down. So it's very basic. Most people have, at least most people I know, apologies if this is not the case for you, but these are basic ingredients to me, and I think that they're ingredients that are super versatile, and that would be good for you to keep on hand to have like a well-stocked pantry. And then what does she do? She puts in scallions, ginger, and cucumber, shredded carrots, rice or grain of your choice, and my favorite, fried egg on top. That's it. You got dinner right there. So this is one of my favorite recipes. And although I have to say, I actually just will make whatever sauce I feel like. Like sometimes it'll be more like a chimichurri sauce. Sometimes it'll be like a lemon tahini sauce. Again, using what I have in my garden, using what I've gotten from my share, using what I just happen to have in my pantry on any given day. So I hope that's helpful. And again, if you want to email me and ask me, tell me what kind of things you like, I'd be happy to send you in the direction, because I can't even express how many vegetables I have. I mean, how many recipes I have like in my head and on my bookshelf. So I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to help guide you further.
Here's one more question on the chat before you jump onto the vegetables. Real quick, how do you safely store garlic confit? I've read mixed things about concerns about botulism. That's from Kelsey.
Some people will store garlic confit on their counter. If it's the idea being that if you cook it for a very long time and then store it in the oil that it's cooked in, then it should kill most of the germs. But if you're worried about botulism, just store it in your fridge and it'll be fine. Between the cooking, which destroys the germs, the oil, which keeps the moisture out, which the moisture is what is going to help the bacteria, usually help bacteria. Well, I guess not botulism, but anyway, between the oil and the cooking and the refrigeration, you'll be in good shape. You don't have to worry about if you refrigerate your garlic confit, you'll be fine.
Great.
All right. Can
you tell us about those great veggies you got sitting there?
Sure. You know what? I had a list of some of people's questions, but I'll just go through with a few of these. I'll start with this super basic one. This is spaghetti squash. And while I do not think that it is a substitute for spaghetti, like some people will claim, I'm not one of those people who is going to tell you it's the same as eating a bowl of pasta. It's not, but it is its own thing and it is delicious in its own right. Okay. So basically what you want to do, this is so simple. You cut this in half, you put the two halves on a baking sheet, you oil it a little bit so it doesn't oil the bottom, oil the cut part so it doesn't stick too much, put the cut side down, bake the heck out of it at a reasonably high heat, like 400 degrees. That's something that a lot of people don't talk about. A lot of people don't use enough heat in their cooking. Heat's your friend, especially when it comes to making vegetables taste good. You just cook the heck out of it, roast the heck out of it for a while. Okay, I could give you, again, any of these books will give you more specific times and temperatures, but cook the heck out of it for a while. You scrape it out, and then you put the fat of your choice, whether that's coconut oil, I prefer butter, or extra virgin olive oil would also be delicious, and some kind of lovely zingy herb. I love rosemary. Butter and rosemary is my favorite thing on spaghetti squash. You scrape it out, you scrape out the roasted halves with a fork, you mix some butter into it, put some chopped rosemary in there. It's delicious in its own right. It's not pasta, but it's still delicious. Another thing that is, I'm just going to tackle this one right away because this kohlrabi is intimidating to even the most experienced cooks. And I'm gonna be honest, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite, but I still know how to make it taste good. And there are two ways to make this taste good. One, so this is in the brassica family. So this is it's going to have a vaguely similar flavor profile to a broccoli or a kale, but it's just in root form. Okay. And this is very tasty two ways. Both ways, it needs a little bit of dressing. It's not my most flavorful vegetable, but it is nutritious and it can be made tasty. You can either slice it. Oh, I guess I could do that here, right? Either you slice it into thin rounds and then you roast it, and then again, put the dressing of your choice on it. I would recommend something sharp and tasty. A vinaigrette with Dijon would be delicious on this if you roast it. You could roast it in combination with other vegetables. You could put it in a soup, although that wouldn't be my first choice. My first choice of what to do with this is to shred it into a slaw in combination with some other things. Like kohlrabi and apples is a delicious combination. Kohlrabi and apples with maybe shallots and Dijon and lemon and honey. Delicious. It would be delicious. Or you could go for a more mayo-based kind of like an aioli kind of dressing, and that would be delicious too. You could do, you could lean more towards an Asian dressing with like a sesame oil. But I think that it really requires something kind of sharp, and it does benefit from being combined with some other flavors. Those are my favorite things for kohlrabi. And there's some real gems here that, like, I'll be honest, I was intimidated by okra for a really long time. And in my experience, you can do okra one of two ways, and they're at opposite ends of the spectrum. Either you go the Indian route and you cook it at a really high heat to dry it out and with like lots of spices. Like, so you would saute it with lots of spices so that the gooiness goes away and it gets nice and crispy and delicious. Or you go the opposite end of the spectrum and you lean into the mucilaginousness or whatever. That's not a word, but So you lean into the gooiness, and that's where you would put it in a gumbo, in a stew, and you would let it do its thing and give texture to the stew, to whatever you're making it with. And then it doesn't taste gooey anymore once you mixed it with all sorts of other delicious things. And it's just giving body to your soup. It's making your soup into more like a stew. And it's honestly delicious both ways, but you kind of have to go one or the other. You can't do it in the middle. You can't like gently saute it. It's just going to turn into a pile of goo. Either you cook it at a really high heat with lots of spices, or you put it in a stew, at least in my opinion. Prove me wrong. If you have another way to cook it, I'm all ears. Also fried okra. Like, you can't go wrong with fried okra, but that's too easy. It's too easy. And also, I don't do a lot of deep frying at my house, and most of you probably don't either. But yeah, you also can't go wrong with fried okra. It's delicious. What else do we have here? You know, something that we do a lot of at my house. And if you remember at Genesis, or if you have a CSA, then during the spring and the fall, you probably get a lot of greens, like a lot. And this is chard, which is so gorgeous. And something that we do, again, it's just kind of a rule of thumb, it's a rough formula, is we do some variation of beans and greens. Beans and greens, and then something garlicky or oniony, and then you can dress it up to your taste. So one thing that we'll do is, if escarole is in season, we'll do escarole. And if you're, you know, if you just want to make it dead simple, you take a can of cannellini beans, you saute some escarole in olive oil with garlic, you dump in a can of beans, you squeeze half a lemon on it, you grate some Parmesan on top, boom, that's it, you're good, you're good. You could do some crusty bread, you could put it over pasta if you wanted to, but we do some variation of beans and greens, like a lot. That's because there are so many variations. Like if you go all over the world, people are eating different variations of this. I have I make a palak paneer, which, you know, not so different. It has, well, actually, wait, no, palak paneer doesn't have lentils in it, does it? Well, anyway, my point stands. You take a dal, you put spinach in it, and you put whatever veggies you happen to have on hand. Like my favorite dal recipe that I was talking about, you can make it with or without greens, and sometimes we'll do either way. But essentially at the like, if you just go down to the bottom of it, it's just lentils and greens. Then you just make it, you beef it up and you make it taste good with other things. So I'll be honest, chard is not my favorite green of all time, but it's still very delicious, and it's also beautiful, which helps, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to separate and you can do it however you like. You can do it super rustic like this, and it depends on what you're making, right? If you're making something that you want to look nice, that's a little more refined, then you're going to cut the ribs a little bit more precisely. Because honestly, if you take this and you could make a risotto, and you take these stems, you chop them up, and you saute them with whatever you're sauteing at the beginning of your risotto, with some shallots or onions or garlic or whatever. And then you can take the greens separately, and you can steam them, you can saute them, you could even broil them. One of my family's favorite just like super quick weeknight meals is to take, again, this is a rough formula, we substitute other things depending on what we have: kale, broccoli, chickpeas, red peppers, and onions, and just roast the heck out of them at like 500 degrees. I do use 2 sheet pans to do it, because obviously kale does not cook at the same rate as, you know, as onions do. But the crispy kale, and then you put garlic and lemon on everything, because in my opinion, garlic and lemon make everything taste good. But the texture of the kale, it doesn't taste like some people don't love, you know, like wilted greens. Some people don't love that. But when I make the kale crispy, my kids go crazy for it. Kale chips or roasted kale in the oven, they love it. And so I'm like, all right, this works. So I'm putting this in my repertoire, and now we make it, like, you know, once a month. But back to a risotto, if you're making this for a risotto, I would chop the stems. I would make the risotto, put whatever flavors I like in the risotto, and then I would saute the greens with some lemon on the side, and then you plate the risotto, put the greens on top, and you have like your starch and your vegetable. And maybe you have a protein on the side, or maybe you have some lentils that you can put on top of that. You know, you round out the meal in whatever way suits you. But yeah, chard is really beautiful, and that makes up for the fact that it's not my favorite flavor, because I love greens so much. So it's really more that I love greens so much that there are just like 3 or 4 greens I like better than this one. So it's not that I don't like it, it's just not my first choice. And so something that I did not like until maybe a couple of years ago is beets. And now I am like the hugest beet convert ever. Cabbage and beets are like some of my favorite foods now, and they did not used to be my favorite foods. And some of that is due to a phase that I went through with Eastern European cooking. What they have so many delicious ways to eat beets and cabbage that I'm just like, I'm never going to run out of ways to make beets and cabbage taste good. But there are, beets are not as scary as you think. They are going to turn your hands purple, and that's just, I don't know, that's just how it is. I just choose a time when it's not that important. So, what I do is not, I know a lot of people say that the standard is to say, roast them in the oven, slip the skins off, which has never worked for me. I don't know if that works for other people. It doesn't work for me. I peel it with a vegetable peeler. I cut them in half or in quarters, depending on how big the beet is. And then I steam them. I love steamed beets. And I mean, I sometimes eat them by themselves. Honestly, Genesis beets are so sweet that you can just eat them by themselves. They taste like a sweet potato. They have the sweetness of like a super sweet potato, or super sweet carrot. But if it's not your favorite thing, then there are a lot of other things you can do. You can make a beet salad. You can make an Eastern European beet soup with like buttermilk and cucumbers and scallions and lots of dill. Another fun thing to do that I think I got from Ottolenghi down here. He's another one of my favorite vegetable chefs, is a beet frittata. Like I said, we love the frittata at my house. And in that context, the beet is grated and sauteed with dill and scallions, and then it is put into a frittata with some kind of cheese. Is it feta? Feta would be good. It might just be Parmesan. Honestly, I think maybe we just sprinkled some Parmesan on top. That's honestly delicious, unexpectedly delicious. I made it on a whim, not thinking I might not like it because I had so many beets and I was trying to figure out new things to do with beets, and we loved it. Now it's part of the repertoire. But yeah, you peel, steam, roast. I love a beet salad. With whatever greens you happen to have on hand, and some lentils and some goat cheese. Oh my goodness, that's heaven as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, maybe it's not heaven to you. Let's see. What else? What do people want to see, or what? I feel like maybe I'm not being specific enough. I know everybody has such different lifestyles, and people like different flavors, and people have different like ways that they like to treat their dinners. I want to help you specifically. So if you have some idea, if you have some specific questions, I'm eager to hear them. Any more questions?
Harry had a question. What is your favorite air fryer hacks with veggies?
I know this is crazy. Don't hate me. I don't have an air fryer.
You're like one of the only people on the planet, I think.
I know I am. I mean, I just love roasting things. I'm sorry. I don't have an air fryer. I just roast things at a really, really high heat, which yields similar results, but I know not as quickly. I understand. But you know, I could probably look some stuff up from some of my favorite sources if you'd like after the show.
We have another question. Do you have any tricks for preserving vegetables?
I do, actually. That was actually my next question. So thank you very much for leading me into my next section. I mean, of course, it depends what it is, right? This time of year, is a lot. There's a lot of harvesting and food preservation going on at my house, and maybe at your house as well. We're going through 50 pounds of peaches on my front porch. I got tomatoes coming out of my ears for my garden, corn and peppers. So it really depends on the vegetable. But with that said, there are a couple of quick and easy ways that we like to preserve things at our house. One is the quick pickle, and that works for not everything, obviously, but for a lot of things. Again, if you're a member of Genesis, you'll see that there are a lot of like Asian greens, especially in spring and fall. I love to take those mustardy, those greens that have like a little bite to them. They might have a little bitterness, but they're a little bit hardy. So an arugula is bitter, but it's tender. It's a little bit bitter, but it's tender. But then a mustard might have a similar level of bitterness, but it's hardier. It's like a chard leaf, or maybe even a little hardier than this. And that can stand up to a quick pickle. Like, you don't want to boil the heck out of it, but I have a really wonderful recipe. Again, happy to send it to you. Where it's just so simple. It's you take rice wine vinegar and salt and a couple other ingredients. You basically tear Asian mustard greens into bite-sized pieces. You stuff a jar, whatever size you want, really, full of the greens. Like, pack it in as far as you go, as much as you can, because they're gonna wilt a lot. And then you boil the brine, and you pour the hot brine over it. If you like chilies, I always put chilies in. You don't have to if you don't love spicy things. You could put some garlic in there. That would be delicious also. And you pour it over the greens, and they wilt. And then you put it in the fridge. And you can have it go overnight. You can have it go for a week. Obviously, the longer it sits, the more pickly they'll get. And I love to put those, it's a really way to pack a little nutritional and flavor punch to stir fries or stews, especially something that's like, you make some fried rice, or you make a rice bowl and you put some of these pickled greens on it. They're delicious, like seriously delicious. And you could do a quick pickle for, let's see, onions. You can do carrots. You can do cucumbers. You can, last year I found a really terrific recipe for Eastern European pickled tomatoes. They were delicious. That one is a little bit different. You kind of blend up all sorts of garlic and herbs, and then you pack quarter tomatoes into it. That's really delicious. So a quick pickle is a really nice way to go. Now those pickles aren't going to be shelf stable. A quick pickle, you're probably going to want to put it in the fridge, unless you know how to can it safely. But I often don't. If it's something that I have in my fridge, it's like, oh my gosh, I have so many cucumbers. We're not going to eat them all this week. I don't want them to go bad. Cut them into chunks, make a quick brine, pour it over it, and just throw it in the fridge for a few days. And then you got pickles in a few days. You can pickle a lot of things. Also, we also freeze a lot. I try to, I do like to can things, because I like things. It's nice to have things that are shelf stable, if the power goes out, or you're not using energy, or if you have limited space and you don't have like a big freezer to put things in. But I gotta say, freezing is a really wonderful way to preserve the flavor and the freshness of many, many ingredients. We've been getting a ton of corn from Genesis this year. And so, our family will eat corn on the cob, or I'll make something with corn once or twice, and we'll still have like 4 or 5 ears yet left over. So I cut the kernels off the cobs. You don't have to do anything else to them. You just throw them in the freezer. That's it. And you can do the same thing with tomatoes, with peppers. You are going to be, you're going to be a little bit limited in what you can do with them once they come out of the freezer. Like a tomato that comes out of the freezer, you're not going to put that in a salad. A pepper that comes out of the freezer, you're not going to put that in a salad. But there are so many things that you can do with them. You can roast them, fry them, stew them, you can do a lot. And what else? I do have a dehydrator, so I do dehydrate some things. That's not something that I like. If I'll dehydrate herbs, I dehydrate tomatoes sometimes. I actually dehydrate zucchini to make this zucchini pickle that I love, where I halfway dehydrate it and then I layer it with garlic and mint in a jar, and then you pour oil over it. It's very tasty. It's almost like meaty, like a salami kind of, when it comes out. You could do, squash can be frozen. Those are, quick pickles and freezing are probably two really easy go-to things that don't require skills. They don't require special equipment. There are no safety issues with them. They're kind of like tried and true, super easy things. That helps.
There is a question about this is from Justine, what would you like to do with fennel? What do you like to do with fennel?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love fennel. This can also be a little bit intimidating, but now I beat some of my but I often use fennel in like a Mediterranean or an Italian type recipe. I like kind of like stewing it, so stews or pasta. Those are the two ways that I primarily use fennel. Although, oh, grilling, although grilling is really good too, actually. I'm doing that for the Genesis dinner. I'm grilling fennel for one of the courses. And, oh, thank you. And pickled fennel is tasty too, although, you know, sometimes, you might, you know, you're like, what am I gonna do? If I pickle fennel, it's tasty, but you don't wanna just pickle it just to have it sit in your fridge. So honestly, I like to, this benefits from, this will caramelize a bit. So what I usually do is you cut the core out. So depending on what you're doing with it, you can see this little core in here. That part you don't want, but everything else basically you can eat. Sometimes these stalks can get a little bit tough, but you just take a little, cut off a little slice and taste it and see if it's still tender. If it's still tender, eat it. And of course, these greens are delicious, and these greens can be used to garnish your dish at the end. So I would probably take this and I'd cut it up. I would cut the core out, and then I would slice it up, and I would cook it at a reasonably high heat, probably with some onions and garlic. And then again, whatever else you like. If you like tomatoes, this would be great with sausage if you eat meat. Because like pork and fennel is a classic combination. You could just, if you did eat meat, or if you and you want to grilling fennel along with like peppers and onions, and then serving that with some pork would be delicious. Or if you didn't want to, if you wanted to go the pasta route, you could do fennel and onions and something lemony and serve that over pasta. Again, great with beans, great with cheese. The pasta is probably a popular one at our house to do with fennel. I love fennel, and I kind of I don't know how the rest of my family feels about fennel, but they eat it anyway. I hope that answers your questions. Again, I'd be happy to send you recipes after I have some time to like marinate and think about these specific ingredients for a while.
So do you have a strategy when you get home with your share, or when you get home from the farmer's market and you've picked up all the stuff that's gotten you all excited? Do you have a strategy when you look at all this stuff on your counter, like this I have to eat first, that I have to, or this has to get washed, or I have to make sure I put this in this container? Can you share a little bit about that kind of thinking? Because it's always different, right? The harvest is different every week. You know, what's your thought process with that?
I definitely do. I do have a strategy, and I'm let me think it through. So of course there are some things that need to be put away right away. I don't think that I wash anything right away. Most things I wait until I use them to wash. Because Genesis veggies are so fresh, they will keep in the fridge for a very, very long time. I mean, the lettuces easily keep for a couple of weeks, if not longer. And most of the things will keep like shockingly long amounts of time. But with that said, you want to make sure they will last as long as they can. So like I said, I have a dedicated bag in my fridge for anything that's dirty, any dirty vegetables that are going to stay dirty. Any root veggies go into the root veggie bag, and they go in my fridge. I think that the most important thing is separating things based on how tender they are or how delicate they are. So I'm not going to put the beets in with the chard. You know, not only is the chard going to get super dirty, but they're not going to be happy together. You know, the beets are going to crush the chard as things move around in my fridge. And I classify my vegetables kind of based on what kind they are and how long they've been in there. And that is my best guide in helping me organize my fridge. So like I said, so for example, the beets and the carrots are going to live together in the dirty bag. And then the peppers and the cucumbers will be together, for example. Some things can just sit on the counter, like squashes, especially if you're going to use them in the next, like couple of weeks. Things that I leave out are potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, garlic, tomatoes, squash, melons. Those things stay on the counter. some of them, like, for example, there's a melon on my counter from Genesis last week, and that's on the counter because it's going to ripen better when it's out. It's not going to ripen in the fridge. It's not going to develop those nice sugars that are going to make it extra tasty. So I'm going to try to wait until exactly the right moment and then eat it. And so yeah, so basically organizing by tenderness and by age and by level of cleanliness, I would say, is what I do. And also need for refrigeration, because like I get to the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, my fridge is so full of veggies, I'm not sure what to do. And when that happens, I will try to take a little bit of extra time to process some of the veggies if I have the time. So for example, not long ago, we got like 12 ears of corn, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to fit 12 ears of corn in my refrigerator. But what I did do, as I said, okay, this week we'll eat corn on the cob one day, and then I'm going to cut the rest of the corn off the cob. I'm going to throw it in the freezer or put it in a Tupperware container in the fridge, and I'll use it for something else. I'll use it for some other recipe. And then if the week goes on and we haven't used it, all right, then it goes in a Ziploc bag in the freezer until the time is right to use it. So you do have to be a little bit adaptable. It is a little bit of extra work. For me, it feels so worth it because the quality is so high and they're so delicious. It feels like a privilege to work with these vegetables. It can be intimidating. It can be a little intimidating at times too.
So I know that our community, meaning the Blairstown area, we've got the Food Shed Alliance runs the farmers market, which will definitely run on Saturdays from 9:30 to 1 until the end of October. We may again extend it until the Saturday before Thanksgiving, but that decision still has to be made. So we've got 4 really excellent veggie produce farms selling there, as well as a bunch of other stuff. There is one certified organic farm, certified. So that's Kimball's Farm. So if people are looking for places to source, and there's a question in the chat that asks if Genesis has a farm stand. So do you want to take that one?
The answer is an incredibly unhelpful sometimes. If you follow our social media, then you will see when the farm stand is open. It's very erratic, I'll be honest, but often it's open in the fall when the root veggies are being harvested and these things that keep a little bit longer are in abundance. That's often when you're going to see the farm stand open. But so the best thing to do is follow on Instagram, ideally on Instagram, but Facebook would work also. And there's always an announcement when the farm stand is open.
Okay. Are there any other questions we've got about 20 people on, which is great. Are there any other questions we could do through the chat, or you can raise your hand? Do you have anything else that you want to impart to us about getting, the most out of our veggies and our local food?
I think I'm going to stop there because I could talk about this all day. But it's at some point I'm just going to be rambling. So I just want to, you have everybody's email addresses, right?
Yeah, so tomorrow I will get the link to the webinar, the recording, and we're going to post it on our website, and I'll send that out to everybody. If you can send me the materials you want to send to folks, the attachments, or however you have the links, whatever you want me to do, I'll send it out to everybody. So you should get it by the end of the day tomorrow for sure.
And if you want to send me a question right now while you're thinking about it, my email address is kate.munning@gmail.com. I also included links to the Food Shed Alliance and myself on the resource sheet that I made. And I will get that out. I'll get that to Lisa and she will distribute it to all of you.
Great. Yeah, her email is in the chat also. So. Well, great. That was terrific. I really appreciate your time and everybody's time who came out tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. You can shoot us a little thumbs up if you liked it. And we're going to do another one. We have another one coming up in 2 or 3 weeks in October with Reed Giacomara, who's going to talk about foraging and using food like that. Hold on, I do see an upraised hand here. Okay, Madeline, you can unmute yourself and you can speak. Madeline, you're going to have to unmute yourself. There you
Thank
go.
you. It was most informative and appreciate it. And there were many things there that over the years I've found that are very helpful from being part of Genesis, and learning to just make notes on keeping track of what I picked up so that I can put in order what I want to make. And then I start making menus, and that really helps to find a way to make sure you take care of the perishables, the most perishables first. And but this has been wonderful, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I actually do that too. And I thought about mentioning it, but I know I didn't want it to be overwhelming, but I do keep, I do what you do, and I found it to be super helpful. We in our house, we very much eat with the seasons. And what I do is I keep a record of all the food that I make, and then I can go back to last year and see what we were eating last September and the September before. And
I do the same.
It's so helpful, because the problem
I
is,
don't know how many years I have. I have these little 3x5 file cards with all that information on there, and I can go back at least 5 years now. But it's wonderful. It's amazing. And one of the things I'm going to say about beets is Flora has on the Genesis Farm recipe page, Genesis website, a recipe for pickled beets, which is terrific. It's very simple and very good.
and another recipe that's great with beets that is I think this is Farmer Judy's recipe, is the roasted beets with you roast them in coconut oil, and then you
Yes.
Oh my gosh, like
Yes,
so
absolutely.
so delicious, so delicious.
And lime, yeah.
Yeah,
That's terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the challenge with eating seasonally, is that when you're trying to eat with the seasons, that means by the time the next year comes around, you might have forgotten what you were making with whatever you're going to be getting in your share. And so that's why that record keeping can really come in handy. Because I'll forget, and I'll try to research new recipes, which is great, but we don't always have the time or the energy to do that. And it's nice to hang on to recipes that we love. And so it's nice to make the same things year after year. It's comforting.
It is comforting. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time.
So Kate, Nancy had a suggestion. She said you should seriously think about creating a simple compilation of your favorite go-to meals. You could sell it to all of us, and we would be happy to support that project.
I agree.
Well, I'm not very good at the selling and the money making part of all this. I will just give you my meals. Like, you could just have them. I'll just tell you what they are.
Very generous. Well, thank you again for your time, everyone. Have a great evening. I am starving right now talking about all this great food.
I gotta go eat my dinner now.
So with that, I'd just like to say goodnight, and look on our website. We've got more things coming up that are oriented to promoting local food and our local farms and healthy eating. So have a great night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.